I love it. I love it. I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
What's up, my homies? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. This one's going to be Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Very, very good main event fight. Before we go any further, make sure you head kick the like button and TKO the subscribe button too. Before we get into this card, we're going to do what we always do. Take a look at some bets and do a super quick recap of the last card. If you don't want to stick around for that, you can use the timestamps below to skip ahead. Okay, so the bets. We changed up our betting strategy just a little bit this week and it went okay. We made a small amount of money, couple singles that came in that covered us really early on this card. Okay, the recap. First fight of the night. Now, I know we're going to be split with our opinion on this fight. Hubbard versus Max. Now, don't get me wrong. Every single fighter has the right to stop their fight. If you don't feel like you can continue, you can stop your fight. But I feel like the difference with this fight and this stoppage was will and mental toughness. You know, Max was really, really tired at the end of that second round. And, you know, he didn't have the willpower to go into the third round. We've seen guys like Ortega, who can't see out of his eyes, willing to go back out there, you know, and that's the type of fight you should be stopping. Whereas Max, you know, he didn't have two broken hands. He could see out of his eyes. He didn't have no real significant injury other than I'm mentally beaten in this fight. So, like I said, if you're the fighter and you don't want to continue, you have every right to stop that fight. I'm not complaining about that. But it's a little bit disappointing to see that his mental took him out of that fight. But as for Austin Hubbard, really composed, beautiful performance. And like I said, he is going to make it hard for you. If you're a wrestler, he will make it hard and he will not give up. Austin Hubbard is a decent fighter, man. Lauren Murphy and Roxanne Modafferi. The difference in that fight was Lauren just wasn't taken down. You know, Modafferi could not get her down. Worked a little bit up against the fence, but couldn't get the fight to the mat. Justin James and Frank Camacho. What can we say? Justin came out for a brawl. Frank Camacho felt he could pick his time, you know, pick his shots, be cool, calm and composed and not fight like the crank normally fights. Well, you know, he wasn't ready for the brawl and Justin James was, so credit to Justin there. Gillian Robertson and Courtney Casey got this one wrong. Gillian just dominated this fight. Every time she ended up on top, she stayed there. Really impressive there from Gillian Robertson. Even got the submission really late in that last round too. Marc-Andre and Oscar. Finally, Marc-Andre gets his first UFC win. And, you know, he did look quite impressive in this fight compared to his last UFC fights. You know, there was a change in his attitude. Tecia Torres and Van Buren. Ticia's a veteran, man. She got it done. What can we say? Van Buren looked good in that first round, but after that, just tired. You know, not really. Couldn't get the takedown. Couldn't compete with Tecia Torres. You know, am I surprised? A little bit. I felt there would have been more of a fight from Van Buren in that second and third round, but Tecia looked great, man. You have to hold your hands up and admit when you're wrong, and Tecia proved me massively wrong in that fight. Bobby Greene and Clay Guida, another decent fight. Bobby just, you know, deserved that win. He has had some really close fights recently. He got in there with a veteran in Clay Guida and done very well in that fight. Jim Miller and Roosevelt. Once again, the veteranship comes through. Was wrong with that pick. Jim Miller snatched the arm, didn't let go of the arm, and experience won that fight. Bilal Muhammad and Lyman Good. This was another very good fight. Bilal just set out with a really good game plan. You know, if you want to hit me, Lyman Good, you're going to have to follow me around this octagon for the whole 5 minutes. And we know if you've got muscle requires oxygen. But yeah, Lyman came on strong in that third round, but not enough to steal the decision from Zalal. Raquel Pennington and Marion Reneau, not really much to speak about in this fight. Raquel's boxing, strength in the clinch, wasn't taken down. That was enough. The co-main event was the real main event. Josh Emmett and Shane Burgos. Man, this was a firefight. Shane Burgos hurt Josh Emmett, the left knee, I believe it was. And I felt, when I saw that, I felt, well, this is it. Shane Burgos is a technical guy and he will just pick his shots now. But, he kind of abandoned that attack of the left knee as the fight went on. And I was a little bit confused by that. But Josh Emmett, a guy who is badly hurt and he doesn't give up. And this is what I'm trying to say with what I said about Max earlier. He gave up through mental failure rather than injury, where Josh Emmett, a guy injured, and the mental is still there 100%. And once again, Josh Emmett, just like Lyman Good, coming on very, very strong in that third round and done enough to get the win over Shane Burgos. Very impressive. Main event, 25 minutes of the same. Curtis Blaydes is a high level wrestler, arguably the best wrestler in the heavyweight division, and he just ragdolled Volkov. Man, what can you say? Volkov didn't have enough to get off the mat, to stop the takedown. He was stopping it, late in the fight, but the damage was already done. Both guys were tired, and Curtis made the fight that he needed to make, and that's a wrestling contest. Alright homies, let's get into breaking this one down. First fight of the night, we have Jordan, the native psycho Griffin, versus Yusuf, the Moroccan devil Zalal. And we're going to start with Jordan. So Jordan comes into this fight 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a grappler inside the octagon. However, Jordan has also shown us he's a good kickboxer. Taken down by Chase Skelly, which completely cost him that fight. Griffin's IQ was not the best in that fight. He was also taken down multiple times by TJ Brown until he was able to find a submission using his foundation jiu-jitsu. The opponent, Yusuf Zalal, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, primarily a striker inside the octagon. Especially from his UFC debut, completely outclassed Austin Lingo. Zalal's footwork, circling, exiting, it looked really good. Popping jab too. This is a really decent matchup. Zalal may want to produce something similar to the debut, staying on the back foot, picking apart Jordan with speed and technique, whereas Jordan will look to use his experience in this fight. So a lot of pressure, looking to clinch Zalal, even take him to the mat, like he did with Dan Ige in the fight in the second round. I think both of these fighters are good fighters, but maybe a little too early for Zalal against a good pro in Jordan Griffin. For me, Griffin has the experience and the tools to win this fight, so I'm going to take Jordan Griffin via decision. And we take a look at some odds to start this card. -110 each side. That's interesting, man. So a lot of people are liking Zalal from the debut, and I can't blame you for that, because you look at his footwork, his speed. It looked really good against Austin Lingo. I don't know how good it's going to look against Jordan Griffin, because Griffin, I think he's going to have to pressure Zalal, take him down, just use every tool he has against Zalal in this fight. And I think at -110, I'm willing to play that line. Fight number 2, we have Jin Yu Frey versus Kay Hansen. And we're going to start with Jin first. So Jin comes into this fight 9-4 as a pro, making her UFC debut. The current 105 champion in Invicta. Looking at a few of Jin's fights, I see quite a composed fighter. A fighter that doesn't really take too much risk, keeps a high guard with her hands, fights behind her calf kicks. She does have a few losses in Invicta, so yeah, by no means the next Chris Cyborg or anything like that. The opponent, Kay Hansen, comes into this fight 6 wins, 3 losses as a pro, making her UFC debut. Kay is primarily a grappler inside the octagon, a jiu-jitsu fighter, with pretty strong wrestling for her size too. Kay is only 20 years old, quite a lot of unknowns for this fight. However, after watching tape on both women, it's evident to me that Kay will pursue the grappling, whereas Jin will look to kickbox. 2 very different styles coming up against each other. For me though, Kay inside the small octagon should be able to implement her style in taking Jin to the mat. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Kay Hansen via submission in round number 1. And this fight is kind of a little bit like Austin Hubbard and Max. 2 very different styles, and you don't really know what's going to happen. Kay Hansen is only 20 years old, but I'm liking her jiu-jitsu and her wrestling. Okay, the odds, we have Kay coming in -150, -140, which is a respectable line. It's not -200 like Max. And we have Jin coming back +120, +130, because she's quite a composed kickboxer on the feet, So, yeah, this line really does resemble the fight we have here. But for me, -140 on the grappler is where I'm going to put my money. Moving into the next one, we have Takashi Sato versus Ramiz Brahimaj. And we're going to start with Takashi. So Takashi Sato comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Looking back at Sato's 2 UFC fights, the debut was impressive, although not many fighters struggled to put out Ben Saunders. Belal Muhammad was able to put on a real masterclass against Sato, no shame in that loss. Sato is a powerful puncher, knockout power. Keeping this fight standing is a must, I believe, for Sato. The opponent, Ramiz Brahimaj, comes into this fight 8 wins, 2 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut, training out of Fortis MMA, which is one of the best camps. Ramiz is primarily a grappler. He's looking to fold your limbs up or choke you out, and he's pretty good at it too. With only 8 pro wins, he has a variety of submission wins, triangles, rear naked chokes, Kimura, and a few guillotines as well, a couple guillotines. Despite being impressed by Ramiz, this is the biggest fight of his life. It's not a guaranteed 10 out of 10 performance. Takashi Sato is going to make this a real fight. For Sato to win, he simply needs to keep this fight upright. It's always easier said than done. You can ask Volkov that. But then we have to acknowledge that Ramiz isn't the same level of wrestler as Blades. So for me, it's really one or the other. Either Ramiz gets Sato to the mat and goes to work, or Sato finds a beautiful knockout punch at some point whilst he's upright. I lean towards the grappler slightly. I'm not confident in either side here because it really could be one or the other, but I do lean towards the grappler. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Ramiz via submission in round number 2. And Ramiz comes in +110, +115, +120. Takashi coming back -130, -120. Yeah, really close line. And it really is one or the other. I mean, if Ramiz takes down Takashi, really goes to work, tires him out, or even finds a submission early, then Ramiz could look like a -200. But if Takashi stays upright and uses that power, that experience in the striking, he could really look like a -200 too. So yeah, one way or the other, I'm going to take the underdog in this one. Fight number 4, we have Sean the Sniper Woodson versus Kyle the Monster Nelson. And we're going to start with Sean. So Sean comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, primarily a striker inside the octagon, a sniper to be precise. Sean had a huge Contender Series win, a flying knee for a guy that's 6'2", fighting at 145 pounds. This fight will be fought at a catchweight fight, 150. Sean was able to have a pleasing UFC debut. Used a lot of knees to keep Karl Bochniak at bay. You know, just raising the knee. It was dangerous. It's a dangerous weapon for Sean Woodson. You know, just raising that knee at 6'2" against these 145ers. It's dangerous. So he is going to use that in this fight. You know, he even stunned Karl Bochniak a couple times with the knee, I believe. You know, so Sean Woodson is going to keep using that same trick. A stepping knee, flying knee, a long jab. That's the type of guy Sean Woodson is looking to be. The opponent, Carl Nelson, comes into this fight 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. Taking a look at Carl's UFC fights so far, I think it's fair to say Carl doesn't have the best conditioning. It looked like he adrenaline dumped against Diego Ferreira. He was even close to winning that fight too. He got tired against Matt Sales. Was able to bounce back with a devastating finish against Polo Reyes. So we could say, you know, it's round 1 or bust for Carl Nelson. And then you look at his fights prior to the UFC and you're seeing some of his wins coming inside that first round. Originally, I was leaning towards Carl Nelson purely because the frame of a 6'2" man fighting at 150 pounds just doesn't look normal. It's dangerous for Sean and for the opponent, I guess. You know, those long legs of Sean's are going to be a target for every opponent. But the flip side is, if Sean can start using his knees, that's where he's going to look good fighting at 145, 150 pounds. You could say that Sean Woodson could potentially become a Dan Hooker 2.0. You know, you look at that stepping knee against Jim Miller from Dan Hooker. I feel like Sean Woodson's like a Dan Hooker 2.0, like an off-brand version, you know? So yeah, like I said, originally I was going with Kyle Nelson, but I've swapped. I am going to take Sean Woodson purely because if he can get outside that first round and then look to just piece Kyle Nelson from a distance, use those stepping knees, keep it upright, I think he could potentially win a close decision. You know, this is a tough one to decide because Kyle Nelson, he has to be working on that conditioning too. You know, it makes it a very tough fight to predict. But for me, I'm going to take a close decision win for Sean Woodson. And the odds of this matchup, we have, those odds are insane. Sean Woodson, minus 230, minus 240. Carl Nelson coming back plus 200. That is insane. Yeah, I can't play Sean Woodson at those odds because I see it being way closer than that. If you're leaning on Carl Nelson, plus 200 is definitely worth a go. Fight number 5, we have Tanner, the Bulldozer Boser versus Philippe Lins. And we're going to start with the Bulldozer. So Tanner comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a striker inside the octagon. Tanner actually uses a karate type style, which is kind of hard to spot considering he's a heavyweight. But he loves to use his low kicks. Really displayed that in his UFC debut against Daniel Spitz. Looking at his last fight, I feel everyone knew Ciryl Gane would win that fight. The most impressive thing for Tanner was he went 15 minutes against Francis Ngannou Jr. You know, lost that fight convincingly, but went the full distance. You know, and we have to credit Boser for that because Ciryl Gane is the future of the heavyweight division, in my opinion. Philippe Lins comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Lins debuted against Arlovski a few weeks ago. I felt Lins actually done well in that fight against such a veteran of the game. Just firing a little more would have gone a long way for Lins in that fight. But it's easier said than done. It's always easier said than done. Stylistically, I like this fight. When you're finding it hard to predict a fight, that's when you know you have a good matchup. Tanner will use his low kicks, potentially even push up Lins against the fence. Lins also will use his low kicks and potentially push Tanner up against the fence. Both of these fighters will be looking to compete on the feet. The difference for me is the takedown option. I believe that option lies with the Brazilian. So for those reasons, I'm going to take the fighter that I believe has the extra tools to score or even finish the fight. So I'm going to take Felipe Lins via decision. And the odds are very close. Yeah, I mean, Lins is going to kick and potentially bully Boser up against the fence, and Boser is going to try and do the same thing. And it's very hard to decide who's going to be the dominant one at doing that. You know, it's hard, and that's why the odds are both minus 110. You know, Lins is going to have success with that, but Tanner could also have success with that. Even in the second round, third round. Yeah, this is a really hard fight to predict, but for me, Lins with the option of the takedown to use his BJJ, I think that could be the difference. So that pick'em fight, I am going to take the Brazilian. Fight number 6, we have Mara Romero Borella versus Miranda Fear the Maverick. And we're going to start with the Italian, Borella. So Mara Borella comes into this fight 2 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. We saw Borella inside the octagon just a few days ago, armbarred by Courtney Casey. Very disappointing performance from Borella. Borella just cannot overcome adversity inside the octagon. If she gets tired, she quits. If she gets stunned, she quits. If she gets caught in a bad position, a potential submission on the way, she quits. She doesn't fight these situations. She cowers to them. You know, and that's just keeping it real. If Borella doesn't win this fight, she will 100% be cut from the UFC, in my opinion. And as brutal as it sounds, rightfully so. The opponent, Miranda Maverick, comes into this fight 7-2 as a pro, making her UFC debut. A jiu-jitsu fighter. Miranda will look to strike with you, keep it nice and calm on the feet, right up until the point she decides, I want to win this round dominantly, which means she's going to take you down, looking to choke you out or fold you up. Miranda is a very strong fighter. Her wrestling and jiu-jitsu is where she stands out. Kinda reminds me a little bit of Felicia Spencer, but a better striker, just a little bit cleaner with her Muay Thai. Does Borella have a chance? Yes. A puncher's chance, I believe. Miranda is a better grappler. She's stronger. She's fresher. Everything points towards Miranda Maverick for this matchup. It feels like Borella was even brought back just for Miranda's debut, you know? It's like the matchmakers said to each other, who struggles with grappling? And pretty much everything else. Borella does. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Miranda Maverick via submission in round number 2. And the odds, I feel this time are warranted. You know, Miranda coming in minus 300, Borella coming back plus 250. How can you argue too much with that? Borella, she cannot overcome adversity. So she really needs to dig deep in this fight. Really stick her jab out there. Look to focus on her boxing. Not quit when she gets tired. That's how Borella wins this fight. But Miranda Maverick, I think she can even compete on the feet and then take this fight to the mat and finish it there. So minus 300, yeah, I'll be taking Maverick. Fight number 7, we have Luis Violent Bob Ross Pena versus Karma Death Star Worthy. And we're going to start with the Italian, Luis Pena. Comes into this fight 4 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Training out of Team AKA, or I believe he actually switched to ATT. So if you know, leave your comment down below. ATT or AKA, one of those camps is Luis Pena's camp. In my opinion, Luis Pena has the potential to be a very, very, very good fighter in the UFC. He is one of my favourite fighters. He has good wrestling. His jiu-jitsu is improving, and it's already tricky, his jiu-jitsu. As a striker, I also think Pena stands out. He's long and rangy, a variety of kicks that he has in his arsenal. Lewis is one of these fighters where if he can put it all together and add a bit of power to his punches, he really could start to dominate these close fights that he's having. The opponent, Khama Worthy, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Huge debut win, a short notice fight against Devontae Smith, and Khama was able to stop that fight with a clean left hook. If you was to ask Khama, how would you like this fight to play out? I'm guessing he would want a firefight. Whether Pena came out on top in that firefight or not, that's exactly what Khama wants. Just a reenactment of his debut. Let's meet in the middle. Let's try and take each other out. The flip side is, Pena isn't going to want that type of fight. He's way too technical to brawl with Khama Worthy. I believe Pena also has a good grappling advantage. If he uses his wrestling to bring Khama to the mat, I believe he could search and find a submission at some point. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Luis Pena via submission in round number 1. And those odds, man, like I said, Luis Pena is one of my favourite fighters, but he shouldn't be minus 270, minus 280. Should be a bit closer. The maximum he should be is probably minus 200. Khama Worthy coming back plus 230, plus 220, plus 240. Yeah, I mean, Luis Pena has shown us, look, I have all these tools, but putting it together has been hard for me to do. Khama Worthy has only shown us, look, I'll come in on short notice and I'll take your head clean off. So Luis Pena, he has to fight smart to warrant that price, which is a lot of movement, a lot of kicks, grapple, take the fight to the mat, because that's the clear advantage for Luis Pena. And I think he can do so, but you know, minus 270 is a bit deep. It should be closer to minus 200, but my pick is going to be Luis Pena. What 6 words are coming next, guys? Let's do it together. You know what time it is. If you waited to smoke with me, amen. If you've been smoking the whole time, amen. If you're not a smoker but you enjoy the smoke breaks, triple amen. Alright guys, make sure you high kick that like button, head kick it, knock it out if you haven't already. If you're a subscriber, if you're not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe, because I do check the YouTube analytics, and 60% of people who tune into my content every week aren't subscribed. So if you're one of those people, you can subscribe. You know, I appreciate you anyway, but you can subscribe. That will help me more. And if you are one of those people and you did subscribe because of this, let me know in the comments. All right, what can we speak about in this smoke break? I have found the MMA gym that I'm going to be training at. For all of you hardcore MMA nerds, some of you, if you're a super hardcore nerd, you might know this gym. It's called BKK Fighters. Jack Mason, who's a pro, is a trainer there. Arnold Allen, I actually messaged Arnold Allen a couple days ago because I found out that he actually trained there. He started off there at BKK Fighters before he moved to TriStar. So I messaged him and I said, I didn't know you started there. And he said to me, anytime I'm in England, I am training at BKK Fighters. And it made sense because Jack Mason is always in his corner for every fight. And Jack Mason is a coach at BKK Fighters. A couple other pros at this camp, Sean Carter, who has fought in Cage Warriors. Steve Amable also fought and does fight in Cage Warriors. So yeah, this gym looks pretty decent. There's a lot of decent coaches there and good fighters too. So BKK Fighters is going to be the gym, the MMA gym that I decide to train at. So I'm super pumped for that. And the training is coming along really well. My jiu-jitsu is what's That's what's really progressing fast, like way faster than my striking, movement, and all of that kind of stuff, man. I just feel like I have that, I'm speaking like I'm a black belt, but I feel like on day one, if I go up against a guy who's a beginner, white belt, I'm gonna dominate him. I can feel it already. Jiu-jitsu and grappling is what I enjoy the most, man. I really need to improve my boxing, my kicking, calf kicks and throwing kicks to the body. That's much better than trying to go high at the moment or spinning. But yeah, my boxing really needs to improve. It has improved a lot over the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, but yeah, my boxing is something I really need to get in the gym for. But my jiu-jitsu, man, boys, homies, I'm a grappler. All right, I'm gonna let you know now, I am a grappler. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope, if you're training, you're still training. Whether you lift weights or whatever you do, man, I hope you're enjoying your passion, doing what you love in life, and everyone should be doing a form of exercise, whether it's, even if it's walking, even if you got to walk for 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day, make sure you get that exercise in. It's the best thing for out of the mind and into the body. So yeah. And if you do know this gym, BKK Fighters, if you know any of the guys I've spoken about, obviously all of you know Arnold Allen, but if you know a Sean Carter, Steve Amable, Jack Mason, or if you know of the BKK Fighter gym, let me know in the comments, because that's going to be cool if any of you guys know about this gym. Alright, let's get into breaking down the rest of these fights. Fight number 8, we have Maurice Greene versus Gian Villante. And we're going to start with Maurice. So Maurice comes into this fight 3 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker inside the octagon, although happy to use his BJJ too. Maurice is on a 2-fight losing streak. Both of those opponents, Pavlovich and Oleinik, were big step-ups in competition. Maurice needs to get back to his striking in this matchup, use that length that he's been using prior to his recent losses. Gian Villante comes into this fight 7 wins, 8 losses inside the UFC. This will be his 16th UFC fight. What can we say for Gian Villante? He's a veteran. He's seen it all. He's in one of those situations where the fighter is out of his prime, but just like Jim Miller or Tisha Torres, Gian has the ability to win these fights that are a step down in competition. Maurice Greene has to use his length in this fight, even take down Gian if he has to. For Gian to win this fight, it's simple. He has to get inside of the reach and go to work with his boxing. In my opinion, it's really a 50-50 fight. I could see Gian landing a beautiful knockout punch at some point. I could also see Maurice Greene go into the body with kicks and hurting Villante. It's really a 50-50 fight. I'm not confident in either side of this fight, but I'm going to take the guy that's fresher, less damage in his career. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Maurice Greene via TKO in round number 1. And yeah, either way, I think if Villante wins, it's going to be in round 1. I think if Maurice wins, probably round 1 as well. The odds, Maurice Greene minus 230, which is way too much. This is a much closer fight than that, in my opinion. Gian coming back plus 200. Those odds, I don't know about those odds, man. They're too far apart. Gian Villante has good boxing. He's a veteran. This is his 16th UFC fight. He has the ability to beat Maurice Greene. But Maurice needs to get back to what he was doing prior to those losses. That's using the length, using the kicks, using his jab. It's a close one, man, but I'm going to have to take Maurice Greene despite the odds not being where they should be. Moving into the next one, we have Brendan All-In Allen versus Kyle Daukaus. And we're going to start with All-In Allen. So Brendan comes into this fight 2-0 inside the UFC, primarily a grappler inside the octagon, a jiu-jitsu fighter, with very strong wrestling. Brendan was able to stop both Kevin Holland and Tom Breeze on the mat, both in impressive fashion too. It's clear to see Brendan is looking to ragdoll you inside the octagon. Body to body is where Brendan wants these fights. Kyle Daukaus comes into this fight 9-0 as a pro, making his UFC debut. Also fought on the Contender Series, where he was able to get that fight done via rear naked choke. Since that fight, Kyle has gone on to win another 2 pro fights via submission, 8 submission wins in his 9 pro fights. I said it's clear to see Brendan Allen wants it body to body. He wants a grappling contest, and so does Kyle. And that's exactly what we're going to get in this matchup. We simply have to decide who we believe in more when it comes to grappling out of these 2 fighters. Both guys have the technique for sure. The difference for me is body strength. I think Brendan Allen is the physically stronger guy, and that's the only real difference I see from these fighters when it comes to grappling. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Brendan Allen via TKO in round number 2. And I believe that TKO does come on the mat. The odds, man. Brendan Allen minus 300. Kyle coming back plus 250. Once again, man, Brendan Allen at most minus 230, minus 240 at most. It's a little bit blown up, but yeah, my pick is Brendan Allen in this matchup. Co-main event, we have Mickey Gall versus Mike Platinum Perry, and we're going to start with Mickey. So Mickey Gall comes into this fight 5 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC, primarily a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Mickey is purely looking to use his foundation, which is BJJ. If he can take you down, you best have a veteran game on the mat, because if you don't, chances are Mickey will sub you. Randy Brown is a strong grappler with good BJJ. He was able to survive and beat Mickey Gall. Diego Sanchez is a veteran who could survive. The question is Mike Perry savvy enough on the mat to survive with Mickey? My answer for that is no. The opponent, Mike Perry, comes into this fight 6 wins, 6 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a savage inside the octagon. Mike Perry will stalk you and unleash bombs from hell at the right time. Over the duration of his UFC career, Mike has improved with his grappling, and he's even become more technical with his brawling. Not too much, but it is noticeable. It's plain and simple with this one, in my opinion. If Mickey takes you down, even takes the back standing, I'm fairly sure he could sub Mike Perry. As always, we hit the flip side. If Mike Perry does stuff takedowns, stay off the fence, Mike has a pretty good chance of landing a huge overhand. I'm picturing something similar to what Gagey did to James Vick. Kinda catches Mickey with his head up in the air, trying to circle and use his kicks. It is a 50-50 fight, again, in my opinion. This time, I'm going to take the striker, though. I just have a feeling Mike Perry is going to be able to keep Mickey Gall away from him, keep him off him, stuff the takedowns, or even get back up. I think Mike is he's a savage. He's a brutal guy. And I think at some point he is going to find that TKO punch. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Mike Perry via TKO in round number 2. And I'm really interested to see the odds on this one. Man, again, I don't agree. I think it should be closer. Mike Perry minus 300 to keep Mickey Gall away from him and stop all takedowns and not give his back up or his arm. No, man. Mickey Gall should not be plus 250. Like, don't get me wrong, right? I'm picking Mike Perry. And I think he will break Mickey Gall at some point, and he has got the tools to avoid that the type of fight Mickey Gall wants. But Mickey Gall is a really good grappler. He's a big guy, and if he takes the back or takes down Mike and just works towards anything available, I think he could sub Mike. Those odds really should be closer. The pick is Mike Perry, but Man, the odds on this card are looking hard to bet on. Alright homies, main event time, and I know we're going to be very split on this main event before I even get into breaking it down. That's how good this main event is. We have Dustin, the Diamond Poirier, versus Dan, the Hangman Hooker. We're going to start with the Diamond. Dustin Poirier comes into this fight 17 wins, 5 losses, 1 no contest inside the UFC. This will be his 24th UFC fight. So we can definitely put Dustin Poirier on the veterans list. Dustin is primarily a striker inside the octagon, and a brilliant one too. Beautiful straight punches. He'll target all areas of his opponent, the legs, the body and the head. Not many fighters, if any fighters, can take low kicks off Justin Gaethje for 20 minutes. Dustin is one of those fighters, which really shows us how tough this guy is. To beat Dustin Poirier, you have to put this dog out. He's a dog in there. The opponent, Dan Hooker, comes into this fight 10 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker inside the octagon. A real contender now at 155. Dan has really been working his way to the top, coming off a very close fight with Paul Felder. And I know some of you guys felt Paul won that fight. Some of you felt Dan won. Either way, that fight was 48-47 to whoever. Dan Hooker is just like Dustin in some ways. To beat this guy, you have to put him out. He is a dog in there also. This is a brilliant main event fight. 2 very high level 155ers going to battle. Dustin, in my opinion, is the cleaner boxer with more punching power. Dan, on the flip side, is a better kicker than Dustin, in my opinion. If I look at the grappling of both of these guys, it's tough to decide there. Dustin has a lot of experience. He's a very decent wrestler, very good wrestler. Dan has some sneaky BJJ that he'll use on the mat also. Trying to find the real advantage is tough in this main event fight. But for me, you know, the one thing I have found and I feel maybe could be the difference in this fight is durability. Like I said earlier, Dustin could take kicks off of Justin Gaethje for 20 minutes and still find a finish. Whereas Dan Hooker kind of shows fatigue and signs of, I'm getting hurt as the fight goes on. You know, Boser easily picked up on the kicks working. Late in the Felder fight, I also felt Dan was slowing down a lot, you know, showing that he was feeling the effects of the battle. So my answer for this one is durability. I think Dustin is more durable than Dan. Over the duration of 25 minutes, I think Dustin could potentially find a finish. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Dustin Poirier via TKO in round number 4. And the odds, again, I hate to say it, again, should be closer. Dustin Poirier coming in minus 220. Dan Hooker coming back plus 180. You know, Dan Hooker has proven it, man. He's been on a climb, and the only guy to stop him on this climb has been Boser, and that guy is an elite striker. You know, Dan Hooker has really shown us how well-rounded he is. You know, his striking, his frame, his length. On the flip side, Poirier, price a little bit too deep, but again, he has shown us as well. Dustin Poirier, do not count that guy out. You know, I took him against Max Holloway, and some people felt that was a horrible pick, but again, man, that boxing, the punching power, the conditioning, the heart, work ethic, you know, Dustin Poirier is a real fighter's fighter, and Dan Hooker's been on a great climb. These odds should be closer, but my pick is going to be Dustin Poirier. Alright homies, if you've enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the like button, and as always, let's get engaging in the comments, man. Let's get going. Alright, peace.